Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you. My name is Rob Keefe. I'm the president and founder of Relitix. We are a data analytics company that serves the real estate brokerage industry. We help brokers make better decisions. So our goal today is to talk a little bit about the Dallas, Texas market. We're going to do a deep dive into the agent pool within the Dallas market. We're going to examine sort of the characteristics of the agents that work there, things that are going on in terms of movement between brokerages and so on. And I'll leave you with a few conclusions. We'll cover a lot of ground here in the next 15 or 20 minutes. So hang on and let's dive in. So I'll start off just with a high-level overview of the Dallas market itself. What are we talking about when we talk about the Dallas CBSA? That's a census-based statistical area. It's the way the U.S. Census defines larger urban areas in the U.S. And this is a 12-county area that defines the Dallas, Fort Worth, and Arlington, Texas CBSA. That's going to be mostly what we talk about today. There will be some discussion more broadly about Netris, and thanks to Netris for their wonderful data that's sitting behind most of what we're talking about. This is their footprint. You can see that the Netris data, for the most part, conforms to the Dallas CBSA. There's a little a cluster over here in northwestern Louisiana as well. So what's going on in the Dallas market? Well, like most places around the country, there's been a lot going on. Things have moved up and down quite a bit. We started sort of 2018 with a healthy 10% growth rate. And we're looking at year-over-year growth here measured every day. And this is growth in closed volume within the Dallas market. Within all of Netris, North Texas Real Estate Information Systems. So we actually had a little bit of a market decline, went slightly negative in the summer of 2019. There's been so much that's happened since then. Most people have probably forgotten about this little dip in a number of the regional markets. Things were rocking all the way up until March of 2020 when the floor fell out again and then zoomed up to a 42% year-over-year peak in the midsummer of 2021, and then the floor fell out from underneath it. The bottom we calculated it being around mid-October of last year with a 14% year-over-year decline in the market, and the market is not yet fully recovered in terms of its getting back to at least even growth. It's still down, and at the date of this recording, which is mid-June, about 3 or 4%. So what about the agents that serve their market? Well, there's about 31,000 of them at the moment. And we're talking about active agents, not necessarily license holders. These are people that are doing things within the MLS itself. If you look at the blue line here, which tracks agent count or active agent count within the MLS, it's grown pretty rapidly. In 2017, which really wasn't that long ago, there were about 8,000 fewer active agents. So as the agent count has grown, so has grown the count of firms. And by firms, that we're doing our best here to define individual brokerage entities. It's a little bit of an imperfect science, but I think this will track pretty closely. You notice, though, what happened as the market began sort of to crater in 2022, these two curves began diverging. So where they were tracking basically in lockstep for a long time. In 2022, we saw a number of firms basically go away. And here's the scale for firms. So, we're talking about 150 or so. And then it's now exceeding the growth rate of agents. We'll look at that in a second. And I have some ideas about what might be driving that, which we can discuss here later today. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the agent count peaked in July of 22, which is about, exactly a year after the market peaked. And it began falling pretty rapidly. Then it plateaued, then it fell, and now it's actually on the way up again. So if you talk to people in the industry these days, the common sort of accepted wisdom in the industry is that, agents are going to flock out of real estate. NAR is going to lose half of their membership. What we've actually seen the last few months is a recovery or an increase in the number of active agents. Don't ask me for an explanation for this. I don't fully understand what's driving this, and I haven't been able to put my finger on sort of what's sitting behind that. But the facts are sort of irrefutable. There are more agents now than there were 3 or 4 months ago. Okay, we mentioned this this firm size. This is tracking the average size of a firm by number of agents assigned. And you can tell there are a lot of tiny firms out there. The average size peaked at 8.5 agents or so at the end of 22, and it's been sliding ever since. I think a lot of this is being driven by the 100% models and different ways of sort of creating their own sort of mini brokerages that have some sort of back-end support, taking some of the heavy lifting of maintaining trust accounts and contract review off the shoulders of the individual broker. But yeah, there's a pretty sharp peak there, and things have begun sliding back. We aren't quite, we aren't quite going down to the size that we started in 2017. So, so let's talk a little bit about how the Dallas-based agents compare to the national averages. So it's a little bit of a busy chart, and I probably could clean it up a little bit, but let me just sort of explain what's going on here. We're looking at year groups. These are years in which an agent recorded their first MLS transaction. Think of them as like high school class years, right? Class of 17, 18, and 19. The blue line here is the national market, and the orange line is the comparison with the market in the Dallas area. So you see for these 2018, 19, and 20, the orange line is below the blue line. You're underrepresented in Dallas for these year groups. There are comparatively fewer agents that started in that 2018 through 2020 year frame or time frame than did in other markets around the U.S. And if you look at 17, it was a totally different story. You have a lot more of them. So, and then everything else is pretty much the same here. So what could be driving that? Well, let's take a look at what was happening back then. 18 and 19 were a market that was more or less consumed by a downward trend in our downward trajectory. And this is another piece of research that will be coming out here later this year, but there's a pretty clear correlation between the pace of entry in an MLS and not the amount of closings, but the trend line of the closings. So and I guess that makes sense if you think about it. An agent's going to join, they're looking at joining real estate. Are they encouraged or discouraged by the fact that that the market is very apparently in decline? Again, this is not a huge difference, but I think that accounts for some of the missing agents in that time frame. So let's look now, just sort of the same analysis, but we're looking at production ranges. So these are agents that did 0 to 2 million, 2 million to 4, 4 to 6, and so on. Everything else lines up really nice, except up here you have more $0 to $2 million agents in Dallas than would be expected by a little bit, by about 5%. I think a lot of that is driven by sort of the fact that you're missing some of those mid-career agents, and instead you have proportionally more brand new ones. But yeah, there are a fair number of low-producing agents in the market. So when we talk about these low-producing agents, the agents that are operating in the market, you could think of this as being a surplus or a deficit of real estate agents. Just work with me on this for a second. If you say that the average real estate agent needs to make X, then there's either exactly the right amount of agents based on the total commissions available in the market, or there's too many or too few. So this is what this slide is attempting to show. I just put in 80,000, and there's a lot of sort of assumptions baked in here, average commission rate and so on. But just to look at gross earnings, we'll call it GCI. If we're saying that the average agent in Dallas, with the underlying assumptions here, needs to make 80,000 in GCI to sort of earn a living and stay in real estate, then we're looking at about 3,600 too many agents in the market. If we instead said, maybe they can get by at 70,000, then it's about the right amount. In fact, we had a little bit of a deficit for a while. So another way of saying this is the average agent in the market with these assumptions in place is making about 70,000 in GCI. But what if we're doing this in terms of sides? If we say the average agent should be closing 7 sides per year, that's a full-time agent. That's what that looks like. Then we had way too few agents for a while, and now there's about 5,000 too many. So depending on the numbers you put in here and how you think about it, we may have something like 10% too many agents in the Dallas market for hitting those targets, which is a downward pressure on earnings for the agents. And obviously builds a competitive situation in the market as well. What about the distribution of agents for the submarkets they're working in? What we're looking at here is a very busy map. These are all census tracts. Actually, they should host about 5,000 residents each. And the color there represents how far the average agent had to drive from their office to service a listing in those tracts. So if you think the further they drive, the less well-served that market is. Remember, it's the same number of people in every one of these boxes. It's not, you can't say that, well, it's out in the middle of nowhere, nobody lives there. Then you're looking at the dark green are areas that have plenty of agents, and the red are areas that have comparatively few agents. And if you look, you sort of stare at this eye chart for a little bit. First of all, it's very obvious that downtown Dallas is well covered. But then you start looking at these outlying communities, they're also pretty green. They have their local agents that are taking good care of the people in that market. The areas in red are the ones that are sort of in-betweeners, outside of the principal market area, but not quite in these outlying communities. Those of you in the market will have a better read for what's going on here. But there are market opportunities within Dallas market. So let's talk about who's operating in here from a franchise perspective. And again, we're looking at another sort of complicated chart, so I will walk you through it. These are different franchises, and you can probably figure out who they are. I'll do some call outs here. The blue line represents national averages for the number of agents, or percentage of agents, and the orange line represents the Dallas market. So Keller is the number one sort of franchise in that market, having about what they would normally get here. There are just a few things that are outliers that I'd call out here. We have way fewer RE/MAX agents in Dallas than would be expected, about half as many. And comparatively, about 20 or 30% more Century 21 agents than the numbers would indicate. And then you've got your hometown favorites, Fathom, United Real Estate, and then over here is JPAR. Obviously, those are big presences in Dallas, all effectively 100% firms that are not equally present in many other markets in the country. So lots of Fathom, United Real Estate, JPAR people, fair number of C21 agents, a little overrepresented there, and EXP and Keller, the two largest franchises. So let's talk a little bit about agent movement in this market. So at Relitix, we publish something called the Agent Movement Index every month. You can find that on our website under research. And what I've done here is apply it only to the Dallas market. So what we're looking at is a graph that essentially outlines the likelihood of any random agent in that market to change offices, with 100 being set sort of arbitrarily at January of 2018. So we had a peak of recruiting activity in 2019 at about, well, what is this, 112. So about 11 or 12% more than had been in January of 18. Remember, this was when the market was starting to sink a little bit. So people were starting to move around and try to find a way to gain a little advantage in that market. Then a big slide pre-COVID, and then carrying into the COVID era, sort of bottoming out in early 21. And unlike many other markets in the U.S., the movement has actually been increasing at a reasonably steady clip since then. So you are almost back to pre-COVID levels of agent movement within Dallas market. And you can see this is the month by month numbers. April is the big month for moving. March occasionally. So it is highly seasonal, and December almost always is the slowest month. So let's talk about recruiting patterns, right? Who's recruiting the most agents, and what's their business model? So what we've done here, each of these bars represent the number of inbound recruits this is over a 3 or 4 year time frame. So we're sort of collecting quite a few of them together. And the blue indicates, or excuse me, the color indicates the business model. So the top 3 recruiters in the market were all sort of these 100% models, followed by Keller, and then CB, Berkshire, Remax, and on down. What I put up here on top, just to do a sanity check, is the average year's experience of a new recruit on the day they were recruited. So you might guess that, let's just say, an EXP is recruiting newer agents than a Coldwell Banker is, and that's really not true, at least not within the margin of error. These are very close to being effectively the same agents. So where are people going? Where are people getting recruited from? Where are they going to? This is sort of we call this the recruiting path, and NA are not specified. These are companies that we've not sort of collected together. Most of them are smaller brokerages, or they may just be sort of mom and pop shops. And the line here is the number of recruits. And again, this is over a period of a couple of years. So the most common path are people that we're not tracking one way or another. The second most common path are people leaving Keller Williams for one of the smaller guys. So let's dive into, and we know that Keller has seen a lot of agents sort of flowing from that business recently. If we look to see where these Keller agents are going, besides this group of people we're not tracking, EXP, another Keller Williams within the market. This is sort of market center to market center recruits, and then Fathom, and then just sort of goes down from here. But between EXP and Fathom, both 100% models, and then Keller Williams itself, that's sort of where those agents are going. So if we look then at who Keller is recruiting from, we can see that a lot of them are coming from other sort of non-tracked companies. And then here we are with the market center to market center recruits. And they're also taking them back from EXP. So there's a lot of action around these EXP recruits. And if we sort of dive into using EXP as a proxy for sort of many of the other 100% models out there, sorry, this is where they're leaving from. I want to see where they're recruiting to, or where they're getting their recruits. They're getting a lot of them from the non-track people. Keller is their number one sort of franchise that they're recruiting from by a wide margin, and then sort of JPAR and the rest of them. Now there's a lot here, and we could sort of go through all these, and this should be a 45-minute webinar, and I'd just be talking myself at the end of it. So let's just keep going and look at it more sort of in a business model to business model path. And if we discard the not tracked folks, the number one sort of path that we've tracked in here are 100% firms recruiting from each other. I know that the sort of mindset might be EXP or JPAR. These folks are taking from the traditionals, and they certainly do that. This is that group here. But their number one source of recruits are other 100% models, which makes sense if you think about it. These are people already sold on that concept. The second one is capped to 100%. That's really Keller going into a 100% model. As far as the traditionals, they're recruiting from each other at a pretty good clip. And that also more or less makes sense. Okay. And then just to look at the time series behind this, or how some of these recruiting efforts have sort of risen and fallen over time, we're looking at quarter by quarter sort of counts, which is, I know it's a very jagged graph, but this is about as clean as you can get. It is a noisy process here. recruiting, and it's definitely not, you're not going to get smooth graphs from it. But I just wanted to highlight a few things in here. I've got this blue line here, this teal line is EXP, and you can see their inbound recruiting really rose dramatically during 21 and 22 and has really sort of fallen off quite a bit since then. You could, in terms of falling off quite a bit, you could say that as a general statement about all these tract firms. The pink line is JPAR. They had a big surge in 23, and now it's, now it's gone very quiet, actually. Keller being more consistent throughout the cycle, and then United Real Estate at the bottom. So we looked at a lot of data on agents. Let me sort of draw a couple conclusions about this, and then we'll wrap. So these are my conclusions from what I've looked at. I'm sure you've got some of your own here as well. I feel like the market itself, in terms of real estate agents, is mildly oversupplied. There's not a huge surplus of agents in the market, but there are probably a few more than are actually needed for the number of homes that are being sold. Broker pool itself is getting increasingly fragmented. We saw what happened with the average size of the brokerage, and I think a lot of that is being fueled by some of these alternative models. But the conventional wisdom is, in bad times, the people sort of flock back to the larger brokerages. And that is not something that we've seen happen over the last 2 years. Recruiting levels are back to where they were before. We're no longer in this sort of depressed state of agents hunkering down, as they still are in many markets. And finally, just a takeaway here, some of these firms, the 100% firms, are increasingly recruiting from each other. So if you are a traditional broker sort of in this market, it's almost like watching watching a fight that you're not part of, and you're sort of a non-combatant, and there's competing sort of a bidding that's going on for these agents within those models. And so don't be as intimidated about sort of having agents leave en masse for something like that. So that concludes what we're going over with today. If we can be of help, please reach out to us. Our website is down there on the bottom, and we would love to stay in touch and talk more about the Dallas market if we can be of help there for you. So thank you for your time, and have a wonderful day.